Let me take you back to where it all started. I never imagined it would come to this, standing up to my parents, putting limits, and really saying no. Imagine me 28, working hard in a computer career, living frugal and sharing an apartment with 2 roommates just to preserve every dollar. Though I wasn't exactly rolling in cash either, I wasn't impoverished. Though they were not impoverished, my parents were not particularly steady financially. Growing up, especially for my dad, money was always a challenge. He would continually be switching jobs, occasionally laid off, always running to make ends meet. Now, with a younger sister named Lily, 3 years younger than me, we felt as though we were perpetually on the brink, just barely surviving. She grew up always the golden child, getting away with everything. She left high school early, never bothered with college, and fluttered from one low-paying job to another. I was the conscientious one, the one who had to create something of himself. My parents urged me continuously that I had to be the one to achieve. They spent their savings and borrowed money to get me through tech school. They never stated it straightforwardly, but it was obvious Lily wouldn't be the one dragging the family out of their financial rut. They made it abundantly evident that I represented their great hope. For me, they gave everything up. Though I could sense the weight of it, they did not say it exactly. They put all that money in me instead of either saving it for retirement or for themselves. Furthermore, at the time, I saw nothing illegal about it. I reasoned they were simply wanting their child to succeed, what any parent would do. After tech school, I secured a steady job, not a dream job but a good start, and vowed myself I would pay them back one day. I kept my head down. Though not much, the salary was sufficient to start saving and pay off some of the student loans, as if a weight had been taken off. When I could, not much but enough to help, I sent them money. Every time I performed, my dad would remind me of the things they gave up for me. It was subtle, but I could always sense shame in his voice. One evening, I visited for a few days right home. We were seated around the dinner table, talking, and it was the first true time off I had taken in a while. Out of nowhere, my dad mentions their ongoing renting. He discussed the noisy neighbors, the ongoing rent increases, and the difficulty of moving every couple of years when the lease was expiring. I remember laughing it off at first, thinking he was just venting. Then he turned directly at me and said, "We're just wondering when we can stop living on rent and finally settle down." Then he remarked, "You might consider purchasing us a house, son. Right now you are doing great. We have done our share to get you here." I blinked midway through my lunch thinking, wait, what? It hit me. They were serious. My mom chipped in, all encouraging. For us, it would literally mean the world, somewhere we might refer to as our own. Only you can bring that dream to pass. I felt imprisoned in that instant. I owed them, however, on the other hand, they had invested so much in my future. Buying a house? My career had only lately begun, let alone purchasing a house for them on top of all else. I was hardly keeping up with my own rent. I attempted to dismiss it as laughable. "Dad, right now I hardly could afford my own rent. Over the next few months, the clues didn't stop. I can't buy a house for me, let alone for you guys." They just grinned at me with this knowing look, like they assumed I would figure it out soon. Every phone call, every visit, there would be a comment like, "It would be so nice to have a place to settle down," or, "All we want is a small place, nothing big." And then, naturally, they would remind me of how they spent their funds for my education, how much they suffered. I could not dispute that. They were correct. But it began to feel as though they were not allowing me options. They were caving in due course. Guilt was their tool. Years of saving and cutting back paid off when I could cobble together enough for a down payment. I reasoned that buying a house would mark the end of all the guilt trips. I purchased them a modest house. Nothing fancy, just a basic property in a quiet neighborhood. They would be content, and perhaps, just maybe, let me live my own life. But it was theirs. Though I still lived in the flat, I thought, this is it. At last they will find happiness, and I can start paying attention to my own objectives. At first, they were delighted. Every call from them focused on how wonderful the house was, how comfortable they felt, how delighted they were to at last have a place to call home. They presented it to their pals, and for once, the continual pressure seemed to be released. They lived somewhere, and at last I could concentrate on my own destiny. But it wasn't as straightforward as I had assumed. The home was merely brought up further. My mother would highlight all the tiny improvements they wanted to perform and imply that it would be great if I could contribute with those expenses. Reminding me how each of us was helping to make this happen, my dad would bring up the mortgage payments. I maintained paying the mortgage and, whenever I could, sent more money to pay it off more quickly. Though I kept telling myself it was worth it, my life now resembled a cycle of job save, repeat. I had brought their fantasy to pass. The guilt did not end, though. Every time I looked at my own savings, I felt as though I was still barely surviving, sacrificing everything for a house I could not even live in while they were comfortably settled in what was supposed to be our accomplishment. And then it happened. My parents made a decision that changed everything. Though others had other ideas, I was starting to feel as though I had done enough, that my part had been sufficient. It began tiny at first, just little remarks here and there. Mom would talk of her great affection for the new house, her comfort in it, and her slow transformation of it into a home. She was attempting to persuade herself that everything was good now, that they were at last at peace. Every time I would call, though, it would be the same. How fantastic the house was, how much they had upgraded it. It was not only about paying off the mortgage anymore. Each time there was a hint, a suggestion, that they wanted me to assist out more. They would discuss the improvements they were doing, painted walls, replaced kitchen cabinets, corrected the backyard. Their casual lines might be, "Wouldn't it be nice if you could pitch in for some of this?" First, I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it wasn't a huge concern. Then we could really use your help with the bills this month. Ultimately, I had already purchased them a house. What more could they be yearning? But then it felt as though I was no longer only supporting, like I was supposed to pay for the house totally. Every time I visited or gave a call, the home dominated everything else. My mother would note how they were still adjusting and how much better it would be if I could assist with the costs. At that moment, I was beginning to become bored, since my dad would have casually brought up the mortgage once more, as if it were only a natural component of our conversation. I had sufficient done. I had bought the house, paid the mortgage, and whenever I could, I had been sending extra cash. Still, it never was sufficient whatever I did. They persisted continuously. They regarded me as a cash machine, a limitless supply of support, not as their son anymore. Then came the times that truly started to irritate me. It was not only about the money anymore, it was about the manner they expected me to give without question, without limit. My sister Lily was there every time I would visit home. She had always been the family's favorite, but right now it felt as though she was exploiting the circumstances. Originally, I gave it little thought. Ultimately, the house was officially hers. Therefore, she could decide whether or not to hang out or stay overnight. At first, it was the typical, "Oh, Lily loves the new place." But it soon became evident she was not just visiting. She has been staying there a lot lately. I would dismiss it, not really thinking of it. But it then grew more bizarre. My parents would note how Lily was spending more and more time at the house each time I visited or phoned. I had no idea what to say when they discussed how wonderful it was for her to have a consistent environment and how she was truly beginning to get her life together. Not supposed to be their residence, was this? Lily was visiting there so lot. Why was that? She seems to have moved in without anybody knowing. So one weekend I made the decision to go up unexpectedly. I arrived hoping to find out exactly what was going on, and Lily opened the door. She lounged about in pajamas, as though she lived there. I felt surprised. She seemed startled to see me, as though I were the invader. "This is where you are working?" she asked, like it was quite natural for her to be reclining in the house I had bought for our parents. I tried to be cool, but I could feel the wrath rising inside me. I came in and glanced around. Clothes, luggage, and makeup abound in all directions. Nobody had bothered to tell me. She seemed to have moved in. I asked her where Mom and Dad were, and she shrugged apathetically, claiming they were out shopping or whatever. I lost calm. "So, are you still staying here now?" She simply shrugged once more. "Well, this is a good location." I wanted to snap at her to tell her off for acting like she owned the house, But Mom and Dad don't mind me hanging around here. I bit my tongue with my mouth closed. Later, when my parents returned home, I attempted to bring it up gently. I didn't want to create a scene, particularly not over something so absurd. My mother brushed it off, saying Lily just needed a place to stay for a bit since things weren't working out with her roommates. She didn't know Lily was staying here. I bought it for a second, but not really. Lily most likely missed her rent payment or was booted out. She was not paying her half. Naturally, though, my parents would never acknowledge that. That evening at supper, they complimented Lily for helping out about the home. They behaved as if she were some sort of hero just by showing up. I was the one paying the house rent in the meantime. Though I was the one making all the sacrifices, I felt as though I had no importance now. It was all about Lily, how much she was helping, how much she needed stability, how wonderful it was for her to have a place to stay while she got her life together. I started to feel like I had been duped. I joined up not for this. Thinking the house would provide the stability my parents required, I bought it for them. But for now, Lily dominated everything. It seemed as though my diligence and sacrifices didn't count. Making Lily comfortable dominated everything. I left that evening feeling more annoyed than I had ever been. Having done so much for them, it felt as though they were merely exploiting me. Though I had tried everything I could to support them, it wasn't enough. I was beginning to understand then that I had to set limits. I could not ignore it anymore. The way things were spiraling out of hand, I could not keep allowing them to take and take without ever returning anything. Every time I spoke with my parents, I felt more like a money source than like their son. And Lily, naturally, was the one attracting all the attention. It was the overall dynamic, not only the home now. I was starting to believe I was caught in a never-ending loop of giving without getting anything in return. It was about respect and about justice, not only about money. A few weeks passed and the situation kept getting worse. I had been working my ass out to buy them that house, to give them something steady, and it appeared like they didn't even see it that way. Lily was there each time I went. She was essentially living there full-time, behaving as though she were living there, so she had no need to inquire whether she could stay. It was beginning to truly disturb me, but I had no idea how to deal with it without driving a great wedge. I kept wondering, perhaps overreacting. Perhaps I simply needed to come to terms with the fact that my parents were aging and required assistance, but the more I considered it, the more it didn't feel right with me. Then, one day my mom called. Her voice was laid back, but something about it seemed odd. She told me, with this odd nonchalance, that they had left the house I bought for them. I stopped, not sure I heard her exactly. "Wait, what? You moved out?" I asked. "Oh, honey, we needed a fresh start. Perry was their justification for everything. She needed stability, she needed help. She was still getting her life together." The words stung. Perry needs the house more than we do right now. What I was hearing astounded me. I attempted to chill off. "Perry needs the house more than you do, so what do you mean?" I said, my voice cracking despite me. "For you, I bought this mansion." She dismissed it as nothing, thinking it was for you and Dad rather than Perry. "Well, Perry finds difficult. We don't mind moving out for her. She needs the consistency. Just momentary." I had no idea what to say, like I had just been slapped in the face. For them, I had given up so much, time, money, even a great portion of my own life. After all the effort I had put into improving their lives, they were now handing Lily the house without even asking me? "Are you really Mom? I bought this house for you, attempting to control the growing wrath inside of me. Now you're just handing it to her, but I thought it would provide the peace of mind you needed. You hardly asked me at all." She sighed and sounded almost defensive. "We assumed you would know, honey. She is from family. She needs this more than we do." The guilt trip was returning. They constantly managed to make me feel as though I was the bad person. I said, attempting to keep cool, "It's not about understanding, Mom. I already paid for the house. I have been paying extra to accelerate payoff of it. And now you claim to have moved out? You hardly even asked me how I felt about it." Trying to appear logical, my dad jumped in, but I could hear his irritation in his voice. "Son, you are doing great for yourself. You are able to afford to be helpful. It's only until Perry gets back on her feet." I kept on, unable to control the snark. She had been getting back on her feet for years. When will my obligation to make everything right for her end? They both stopped. Through the phone, I could sense their disappointment, weighing me like I was disappointing them. At last, my mother replied, "Maybe we shouldn't have assumed you'd be so willing to help your family." Like I was the one acting illogical. "We assumed you would understand, but I knew I had to establish limits, even though I could sense the wrath boiling up. I had to draw a line, and I could not turn back. "Look," I remarked with a firm voice, "this has to alter. Perry moves out, either because she helps with the mortgage or otherwise." My dad's tone changed to seem annoyed. "I'm not just paying for her to live here, I'm giving everything up for it." "Son, you're selfish. For you, over the years, we have done so much. Is it not time you returned a little bit?" "Giving back?" I remarked, my voice growing in spite of my best efforts. "I have already contributed more than plenty. I have tried my best to be of assistance, but this isn't fair to me." They didn't answer but sat there in silence, staring at each other as if disappointed in me. It struck like several tons of bricks. I didn't care anymore since I had spent my entire life to make them proud, and now they were making me feel like the villain for finally sticking up for myself. I had to be tough. I had to make it abundantly obvious that I would not be continuing to enable this. My voice was firm. "I'm done being the one who has to fix everything," I stated. "I'm only paying the minimum going forward. Perry must help if she wants to stay there. If not, she has to find another place to live." They were quiet. They did not have a response for once. My answer startled them, as if they were unsure of how to treat me when I established a restriction. That day, I left their house feeling a mixture of relief and tiredness. My dad murmured something about chatting to Perry, but I could sense he wasn't happy. Though I knew the toughest was yet to come, it felt as though a weight had been taken off my shoulders. Though I had marked a line in the sand, would they honor it? Would Perry start helping? Or would they keep dragging me until I caved in once more? Unknown. But I felt as though I once more had authority over my own life, first in a long time. It became about my own future, my own dreams, not only about the house. A few days later, there was silence, first in a long time, and I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. Not a call from Lily, not a call from my folks. I kept waiting for them to call me, to let me know how offended they were, to guilt-trip me into a back-down. But nothing showed up. The quiet was intolerable. It felt like a relief at the same time as making me uncomfortable, as if I were preparing myself for something major about to strike. At least that's what I told myself. I had set my limits, and for once, they were being respected. A week later, my mother called. Her voice was quiet, nearly resigned. "We spoke with Perry," she said. "She's agreed to start contributing to the mortgage. Just a small amount, but it's something." I felt this mix of emotions, relief, frustration, even a little sadness. Though hardly much, it was something. Nowadays, I was not the one bearing the whole weight. Still, I couldn't get away from the impression that it shouldn't have progressed this far. From the start, they ought to have realized that I couldn't keep giving without restriction. "That's nice to know," I murmured, trying to keep my voice neutral. I had fought too hard for everything I had, and I wasn't going to let them take it all from me again. I wanted nothing to draw it out or start another guilt trip over. Having delivered my point, I was simply happy to have some breathing space. My mother sounded almost disappointed, as though she couldn't believe I had actually asked for something in return. Still, I let that disturb me not too much. I had to keep my ground. This was not about their guilt or about them. It related to my life and me. I had spent years being the one everyone could rely on, but now I had to concentrate on myself. That evening, as I sat down in my little apartment, I couldn't help but think back on everything that had transpired. For so many years, I had believed I had to be the responsible one, the one who gave all for the benefit of the family. Though somewhere along the road I had lost myself in the process, I felt I was acting morally. I had put my aspirations on hold and given up my own happiness to make sure everyone else was all right. At last, though, it made no difference. Nobody had inquired whether I was living the life I desired, whether I was happy, or if I was fine. All that counted was that I was performing my obligation. Now I was done with that. I had to quit letting them drain me, stop living for them, and stop being the one who fixed everything. I had no debts anymore to anyone. Perry was helping, the house was sold, and I had at last set some reasonable limits. A few weeks passed without incident. I could once more consider my own future, what I wanted, what made me happy. Things appeared to calm down, and I really began to feel as though I was once again living my life. I stopped continuously trying to pay off someone else's mortgage for the first time in years. I wasn't thinking about how I might support my parents or resolve Lily's issues all the time. I could concentrate on my own plans and aspirations, but then I received another call from my mother just as I thought all was under control. There was no casual attitude this time. "Son, we need to talk," she continued, her voice tense and nearly desperate. "There's been an issue." My gut turned over. Like the ground was moving under me, I could feel the old, familiar pressure mounting. She had something to say, but I wanted no hearing of it. I had established my limits, done all I could, and I wasn't about to be dragged back into their anarchy. "What's going on? Trying to be calm?" I asked, but I could feel my irritation building. "Well, it's about the house," she responded. "Perry, she was not exactly sure how serious you took the mortgage." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "She is having some problems with the payments, and we were wondering if maybe you could help a little." They were begging me to save Perry once all that had transpired, after I had obviously established that she had to help. With a stern voice. "No, Mom," I said. "I'm not following through here. I have already been more than sufficiently helpful. It's not my responsibility anymore." I could hear her sigh on the other line, like she was unhappy, like I was being irrational. "Please, son. Perry right now finds life difficult, as you are aware. She is struggling." "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Her age is an adult, though. She has to sort it out on her own." There was a long silence on the other end. Then my mother spoke once more, her voice tinged with displeasure. She already gave her enough chances to step up. "We assumed you would grasp. Family looks after family, son." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "That's not what this is about." These days, fairness defines it rather than family. I have worked hard for everything I have. I am not going to let you or someone else take all from me. Perry owes her share if she wants to remain there. It's that basic. I could sense the strain in the atmosphere. My mother answered slowly at first, and I knew she was trying to figure out how to make me feel guilty, but I had finished with that. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. "Okay," she murmured softly at last. And that was it. "We will work out something." The call stopped, and I stayed seated, staring at the handheld phone. Though I had been anticipating some kind of confrontation, now that it was over, I felt worn out. I had done all I could. I had said no when I needed to, stood up for myself, and established definite limits. Though difficult, it was required. Though I knew they would always continue to pressure me, I felt for the first time in a long time I had influence over my life. A few weeks went by, and everything began to calm down once again. I was my own person, with hopes and goals of my own, not only the person they could rely on when things went tough, and that was worth fighting for. There are no more calls from my mom requesting assistance, nor pressure from Lily or my dad. I was living the way I wanted for the first time in a very long time. Though not ideal, it was mine. One evening, after leaving work, I checked my phone and realized I was concentrating on my work, ambitions, and lastly, saving some money for my own future. My mother called me and missed through. Though I had no idea why, the pit in my gut started to grow. "Hey, Mom," I called her back, ready for whatever it was this time. "What's happening?" Trying to project calm, I said, but I could sense the stress building in her voice. "We have to talk," she said. "It's regarding the house. Perry." She is terribly offended. My heart dropped. It felt as though the same narrative was being repeated. "What is going on right now? She just does not understand why you won't help her," I questioned, trying to keep patient but already feeling the frustration boiling up. "We have no idea what else to do. She is feeling rather alone in all of this." I closed my eyes and gently exhaled. And once more, there it was. Like I was the only one who could make things right. They were underlining pressure on me. Usually it was my duty. "Mom," I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, I've done enough." It had always been my obligation. More than enough has been done here. Not for Perry to merely inherit, I bought the house for you and Dad. I could hear her sigh on the other end, and I knew she was offended. But I also knew I had to be tough. I cannot keep doing this. "Son, she's family. I know it's tough. Simply put, we just need a bit more time." I felt a tsunami of wrath sweep over me. "No, Mom. Just a little more help will make it work." I am not doing it. I cannot keep bailing her out. She is an experienced grown adult. She has to help if she intends to live there. That's how it operates. There was a lengthy delay. Everything seemed to be poised on a knife edge. Though I knew it was the truth, I knew they would object to hearing this. Having done everything I could, I now had to take care of myself. At last, my mother spoke once more, her voice gentler now. "I know, we will work something out." But I sensed her displeasure in her voice. She seemed to not entirely get what I was aiming for. I was not claiming to not care. I wasn't claiming I wanted no help, but I could not do it anymore. Not at the expense of my own happiness, my own future. "I just want you to understand," I pleaded, trying to make her see. "For all I have worked hard. I cannot continue giving my life for everyone else. Like me, Perry has to accept accountability for stability if she wants it." There was stillness on the other end. I cannot keep carrying her. Her thoughts seemed nearly weighty to me. At last she sighed once more and murmured, "I know, son. We will speak with her." And that was it. For once, I thought I had truly been heard. My mother refrained from guilt-trip me, from trying to make me feel guilty for desiring anything for myself, from arguing. She embraced it, and I could sense she knew I wouldn't be backtracking even if she didn't really understand. Following that chat, I considered all that had before this point. I considered all the years of remorse and the sense of obligation I had toward doing everything for everyone else. I considered the costs I had paid, the never-ending loop of trying to mend problems unrelated to my life. I came to see that for the first time I was not merely following whatever they required. A few days later, I heard from my mother once more. I had created a boundary, and I was not going to let anyone cross it anymore. Perry had agreed to start making mortgage contributions, she told me. Though not too much, it was something. It was about the principle rather than the money now. The next weeks were calmer. Perry was at last stepping up, and I was not the one bearing weight. Not one more surprise call for assistance surfaced. Though they were still learning things, my parents were not depending as much on me. They were clearly adjusting to the new dynamic, and it was not as simple as they had assumed. I was living my life again, but for the first time in years, I was not the one keeping everything together. Thinking about the things I wanted to do, the goals I wanted to reach, I was saving for my own future. At last, I was able to create plans outside of simply addressing issues of others. Though not flawless, it was mine. It took me a long time to get here, but I was at last free. I was not going to let someone take it away from me. Released from the guilt, from the expectations, from the continual pressure to be the one who always corrected things. For so many years, I had believed I had to be the responsible one, the one who kept everything orderly. Ultimately, though, I came to see that I was more than simply a brother, son, safety net. I was a person with dreams and a future to shape. Now, for the first time, I was really shaping it.